I welcome you all today to this lecture by architect Raman Sikka. Raman Sikka is the Associate Principal Architect at Sikka Associates, which was established in 1981. It is one of the leading multidisciplinary design firms of today and amongst India's foremost architectural design practitioners. It has a team of over 100 skilled and experienced planners, architects, designers, and engineers. Over the past 4 decades, the firm has successfully established its architectural landmarks all across the country, from Leh to Andaman and Jodhpur to Shillong. The firm has also worked in China, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, and Oman. The firm is renowned for its contemporary and contextual approach to design. Today we have, along with architect Raman Sikka, architect Sumit Jain, who is a senior associate at Sikka Associates and is in charge of the IIM Jammu project. We are very thankful to SAA to be able to share an educational and meaningful time with our students and through this lecture and the site visit at Jammu.
Good morning, Architect Raman. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your giving us time to join and share your experience with our students. These are final year students. And I am myself looking forward to this what I would hope will be very insightful discussion and interaction. And since students have visited the site and they have some basic idea about the site and the requirements, so I think your deliberation today will be will serve a great purpose for the cause. Thank you so much for joining, and over to you now, Raman.
Thank you so much, sir. Very good morning to everybody. Thank you for inviting us and our firm to make this presentation, and very happy to share our thoughts, experiences, our works with the student faculty. So I'll get going. We'll just begin with a very few forms of our introduction and then going on to the project. I am Jammu and then maybe a few more current projects. So we began in 81, as Professor Khatri mentioned. And over the 4 decades, I think the range of projects, the portfolio spread across the entire length and breadth of the country, that has been, which we've been fortunate to work on. Today, we are over 100 plus in our Delhi and a few other offices across the country. Our main office remains in Delhi, but we do have, wherever we have significant projects, we have some resident architects, local architects, and resident staff also. Just a glimpse of almost in every corner of the country, we have been fortunate to work and deliver good projects. So we have, I think, good understanding of the mechanism required to take on a project at any part, understand the site, deliver the various stages of the project, and make sure that the project ends up as required by the client in all its aspects. 2 things about our design. We always try and design in a very practical manner, so that our designs are used for decades and decades by the people very easily, very practically. They're easy to maintain buildings which people come in every day and are able to use in a very efficient, very pleasant environment. Buildings are not just meant to be finished and inaugurated, but they have to be repeatedly over the years and years of people's lives working in them, able to satisfy functional requirements, maintenance requirements, how the buildings sustain over the period of time, how the functions that they are meant for may change, but still the buildings are able to allow those. Those are important aspects. At the same time, something innovative, something fresh, something unique about every project is also possible. So it's always a blend of very practical approach, pragmatic, down-to-earth functioning, but something innovative also. At the same time, relevant to the time and place that we make it. So these are the 4 most important aspects. We have been listed amongst the world's top 100 in the last 7 to 8 years. This is a rating by British Journal. Also fortunate to win a few awards over the years. So just a glimpse of the, I'll say, the breadth of the projects, the range of all kinds of works, I'll say, across the architectural and construction industry. A lot of institutional work, a lot of offices, transportation work. So possibly these three are amongst the biggest sectors that we have been working on. Now I'll go on to IIM Jammu first, and then discuss this project more in detail, so that we can see how one project has evolved in terms of the various thoughts, various stages of thought process. Then show you a few more interesting slides on a few other projects that we are currently working on or recently completed. So IIM Jammu site, I believe you would have all largely seen or understood. It's a site which is out of Jammu, between Katra and Jammu actually. It's a site along the NH44, so that's the frontage of the site, and it's a site which is going deep away from the highway between two catchment nalas. So these are drainage catchment nalas, and this basically the ridge of the hills is what the site has been given to IIM. The site is about 200 acres, roughly almost 2 kilometers in length, very linear site. Now, while earlier IIMs, we all understand, they were all largely urban campuses. Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Calcutta, Lucknow, they're all very urban campuses. So the kind of picture that has emerged out of these campuses is very, I will say, regular topography. In terms of land profile, they're all pretty straightforward. And therefore, the buildings have been something which have taken the attention. Buildings have taken various forms, various permutations of spaces to kind of evolve the various functional requirements for the students and the campus. So these are all campuses which are all very urban, straightforward topography land. In our case, when we began the project, there was a design competition. So I'll show you, interestingly, the thoughts at the design competition stage first. What was our first reaction to the site and the brief? What we wanted to actually come up with site, so that it's not just an IIM like many others in urban situations, but in fact an IIM which is very unique to the topography and the site that we have at this location. So that was the initial thought direction, and then I'll also explain to you why and how it changes and how it evolves. So these were a few slides of our initial competition stage entry. Essentially a 200-acre campus to be built in 2 phases. What is important is, of course, that the site, which is so unique, and 200 acres of it, how we develop and how we capture the essence of the site and of the client's requirements and bring them together to make something which is not just very functional, not just serving the academic requirements, but also something remarkably unique. That is what the ideal situation and the ideal design should achieve. Now, campuses, while we may look at campuses from architecture point of view, but we also have to be aware that campuses are something which are used very rigorously by students, right from morning till evening, sometimes even 24 hours. So they have to be very practical, student-centric learning spaces, which are easy to use, easy to live, easy to connect in various parts. While they have to be interesting designs, but they also have to be safe, they have to be convenient, they have to be sheltering enough and practical. So these are a few pictures of the site and of the views around actually. This is the site. So site, what I think you might have seen that it's a very densely green woody area, but the trees are not that many. There are a lot of bushes also. So it's a mix of some trees and bushes, but the area is pretty green, yes. Now, these were a few ridges. So what you see here is, the spot levels of the ridges. So essentially the site is divided into two ridges. One is right from the highway going deeper inside till about the middle of the site. Then there's a low-lying valley cutting right through. And then we have the second ridge which goes diagonally across the balance half of the site. So this was the site condition, and we had to work to complete the phase 1. And then, of course, leave provision for future phases, at least one more phase, if not more. So this is the slope analysis, which shows you how the different ridge points are actually sloping downwards, which is important to understand in a hill, because if you truly want to maintain the hill, then you have to first of all understand what is the feature of the land, what is the essence of the slope that we're trying to capture or build or change. So this shows you the ridge points, this shows you the slopes downwards, and this also shows you some of the catchment areas. So these are the catchment areas which are naturally the edges of the site, but not that these are where the water is already retained, because if there is no boundary, then the water will just flow downwards further out to the rainwater channels. But these are the fringes of the site where the natural drainage is possible to be created. And if you were to create a larger retaining structure, then these can be catchment areas, and we can have larger natural water bodies. Now, if you see also, the hill 1 has a sharper slope to north and a shallower slope to south, and the hill 2 is reverse. It is a shallower slope to north and sharper slope to south. So now phase 1, logically, because the entrance is from the highway, so it was meant always to come up on hill 1. And I think it's quite logical that we also try and use largely the south facing slopes, so that there's more sunlight, more area available for the development of the campus. So 3-4 important things: preserve maximum trees on site, preserve the gradient as much as possible, maintain a gradual slope of about 1:20, which is a walkable slope, so that in a daily commute between the buildings, it's not difficult for students to do that several times a day if required, like from hostel to dining to back to hostel, or to maybe then block academic blocks, maybe again to sports, and there'll be several commutes during a typical day routine. And third was, of course, to create the minimum cut and fill and use the contour if possible. Now, option 1 is, of course, if we create buildings only on the ridge, then while it may be easy to construct, but the negative is that the road network would be quite long, and buildings will change the topography of the site. They will be visible as protruding from the top of the hill. If we build on the slope only, leaving the top free, then while we get a larger footprint, and it'll require a larger footprint to spread it across, but the benefit is that we have possibly lesser cut and fill. So ideal situation is that you build neither on the top of the ridge nor in the valley, and you use the mid slopes. That is by and large the right strategy, to use the slope in a way that we still allow the drainage to the lower levels, do not clog the lower levels, and use the buildings to kind of maneuver between the cut and fill required on the slopes. Find the lesser slopes, build the buildings there, maintain the essence of the site, which is sloping. The ridge being very precious, ridge being very less footprint, can also be used for landscape, can also be used for only a few selective buildings if so required. So that is the ideal situation. So with that thought, we actually in the design concept stage placed the buildings like this. We had the main academic campus, as you see, facing south. We had the smaller blocks to the left of it, going on to the student hostels, and then the sports areas at the valley area. So that's the kind of layout that we at that time proposed. Using the north slope only for very selective, maybe some senior faculty and the director's residence and so on. Everything else was facing south. So the important thing was that we left the entire edge of the site possible to retain water at the lower levels, built at the mid slopes. We took service connections across also the mid slope. The academic block was placed in a manner that having created a bit of a natural catchment area by putting a retaining wall on the extreme southern edge here, we allowed the water to come in and create a natural water body at certain times of the year. Even if the water is not there in peak summers, which it is not going to be, still the element of the slope, the element of the landscape, the element of the green, space itself is also a wonderful thing. And water would have filled up at certain times, depending on the rain, depending on the amount of harvesting or catchment that we can do. So the extent of water was not regulated, only the edge of the water, southern edge of water was regulated. So it was more like a step well kind of a situation where we had thought that we would contour the land into various series of steps and allow the water to be retained in as much level as possible. At the mid level, then we created a few landscape decks overlooking this entire open space with the larger steps, the water body. And on that deck, we had, first of all, the larger buildings approachable from the upper side, from the top of the ridge where the main approach road was placed. The road approached the auditorium building, admin building, and the main entrance to the plaza. Then on the two sides, we placed the connecting link blocks and the student zones with the library and the cafe were at the lowest level. And on top of it, we placed the main academic block, which was overlooking the entire valley and the landscape. So that is the kind of a structure that we had designed and planned, that we would have minimal construction on the northern edge, and we would largely have a linear building placed above the slope so that we have minimum cut and fill. We allow the water to actually slope right through the building below it, and the building is kind of a independent floating, so to say, or an independently placed building with a largely a contemporary kind of a form, but maybe with a few slopes depending on the profile for the terrace that we choose and the solar panels angles and so on. And a building which enjoys the view, the openness, the large greenery that is all around us, and the south facing facade, so that we have plenty of natural light going right deep into the building. From the water body level, that's the view that we would have got. So the lowest block that you see, that is the cafeteria, student center. Then we have the deck level, which is a few other amenities. And then we have 4 or 5 levels of academic buildings. So that was the scheme that we presented at the competition stage. This is the cross section showing how the left mass, which is on the approach side, was smaller, and we use the slope going downwards of the hill to create actually a deck in between. The arrival block is at a level above the deck. It connects right through over the deck to the main block, and main block, then you go either a couple of floors down or a couple of floors up. Then these were a few studies on what kind of relevance of local existing landmark buildings that we could find. So Jammu has Not really a distinct architecture style of its own, while Kashmir, of course, has, but not particularly Jammu. And we thought that if you look at the campuses, one of the most important elements is that if you want to make a design statement, a singular statement material or color helps in making, kind of a very controlled statement in terms of design, bringing a focus to what you want to change. Otherwise, everything else is by and large the same. So there's one canvas, only pick up what you want to highlight. We looked at the choice of materials, whether it could be brick, whether it could be stones, whether it could be more modern finishes. And then our recommendation to have was that because we wanted to retain the character of the site, wanted to retain the greenery of the site, and not make too much of a site construction. Therefore, we in fact recommended a building which is very modern, largely using steel, glass, materials which are prefabricated off-site, brought to site and assembled. And that is the look which we thought would have been a very progressive, modern look for a IIM created in today's date. Identity which is largely blending with the nature, blending with the greenery around it, and not hindering the views, not bringing too much heaviness into the site. A building which is very light compared to any stone-clad or brick-clad kind of a structure. That's the cross-section through the academic area. And these are the three main plazas. So we had one auditorium plaza, which is more of a ceremonial area. We had a central plaza. Central plaza could be a little more formal, but still a place which is a hub, which is used for crisscrossing, which is used for gathering, which is used for small interactions. And then a larger, more informal student plaza to the left side, which is facing the student entrance and the hostels. So that every time, every day that they're coming in and going back, there are spaces between the trees, there are spaces between the contours to kind of stop by, meet, and spend some extra time there. So three distinct plazas, each having its own environment and a certain functional hierarchy, or I can call it use hierarchy in terms of the informal versus formal. And while the local stone was used heavily at the lower levels in terms of landscape, in terms of the podium, in terms of the lower level of the building itself, and maybe some cladding of the low-rise structures, but the structure above that was largely a more modern structure. So these were the levels. We had level 5, which was the entrance level. We had a little bit of a concourse connecting across both sides to the various academic offices, convention center. Then we have the more independent program offices, incubation center, and research labs to the roadside, so that they are more visitor-oriented spaces, and the student and the admin and the faculty are all towards the south side, which is the complete student-centered block. We had a couple of roof gardens in between. Library was at the upper level. So these are the kind of classrooms. They had a range of 45, 90, and finally even 60 has come in. And the classrooms were typically horseshoe-shaped arrangements, so that there's a lot of interaction between the students. So the lower levels were the classrooms, and as we go higher, it becomes more of academic and the faculty spaces. This was a brief study on the various kinds of classroom arrangements. So what you see on the left are the linear ones, which is more of a school-like environment. Then we have, as the classrooms gets bigger, we want students to be closer to not just the board, but also the teacher. And in an IIM, actually, it's a highly interactive environment that's required. So you want students to be closer to each other also. Now, closer does not mean just physically, it also means visually. So typically a horseshoe-shaped classroom brings everybody as close as possible, not only to the board, and the teacher, but also more interactive, vision contact with each other. So various, configurations, various kind of arrangements for the various sizes of classrooms. Then the hostel block was also about still +4. Now in Jammu has a little bit of a harsh climate because it does have a pretty strong summer and it can get a little bit colder than Delhi also in winter. So what we did was that we placed the hostel blocks along the contour in a way that the stilt level of the hostel becomes a covered walkway. So that as the campus spreads, the ground floor or the stilt level of the blocks actually becomes a common public walkway itself, and we don't need an independent structure, so to say. So this becomes a public space or a common space at the lower level, and as we keep adding buildings, they'll all continue to extend the walkway. So along this lowest level, the ground floor, you have a few living rooms, the common room, you have a couple of amenity shops, a few student lounges, and some service areas. As we go, and this also allowed her to not excavate beyond a point at the lowest level, which was the foundation or the ground level. As we go higher, then of course the block expands a little bit, and the upper side was also built. But still, if you see the design, the valley side is all where the rooms are facing, and the left and the right is also going to be open. The upper side, the hill side, is only minimum ventilation, which is the toilets and the service and the circulation space. And they all had central core. So by doing this, we could place the blocks very close to the slope in between the levels, so that the rooms all enjoy good views and good sunlight, but we don't need to project too much over the hill. This allowed the blocks not to be very high, because the hill itself is about more than 60 meters of slope, and the block is only 15 meters. So if you have 15-meter high blocks, then we can place a few of these in between the slopes. That was the idea. Similarly, faculty residences, they were also staggered along levels, so that we use the slope. We come in at the upper level and we step down or step up as required. So those were the thoughts and then using the slopes, as a mix of stone, pavements, and green. And that was the design that we presented, and that's what we proposed at the competition stage. A few more things about building in hills. We would ideally like something like this. So the red shows you possible, natural slope of the hill, and in between that slope, if you can find spaces, so that the cut and the fill is, self adjusting. Find sections, find places where we can, build in a minimum footprint, so that the cutting and the filling gives you a balanced slope, and then the slope upwards and the slope downwards is self-retaining. It's not always possible, but that's ideal if we can do it. And then to retain the slopes is extremely important, because these hills are not just hard rocks, they're actually riverbed rocks. So Jammu area hills were at possibly some point of geographical age at river level, and as these hills have come up, the circular rocks, the pebbles, they have essentially been forming the hills, and they're not very stable. So one needs to be very careful of the additional hill that we leave behind and how stable we can make it by using gabion walls or other techniques. And then local flora and fauna to further, strengthen the slopes and so on. Those were just a few other. I'll skip through this for the time being. And these slides are more of, materials and other details of how the facade would have been. Not just a lot of glass facing the south side, but possibly a double skin, which has a protective outer facade and a central space to clean it, to ventilate through, so that it is self-ventilating. If there is too much heat in the summers, the facade itself self-ventilates out. And other times, basically, the sunlight is allowed to come in, the views are not obstructed. The roof would have been a mix of solar and opaque, using cavity walls right through. So those were some of the principles that we were able to, and despite being a very modern glass and steel building, we were still aiming for Tier 5. In terms of construction material, in fact, we did feel that instead of using a traditional RCC construction on site, heavily labor intensive, a lot of material intensive, a lot of movement would have required. Had we constructed in steel, it would have been minimal footprint, minimal site construction. That was the idea behind it. We also recommended to use prefab elements, for example, like hostel windows. They could have had completely prefab, complete encasement, and the whole section is brought and fixed as the block work is being done, so that the window is already there, it's already self-aligned, it's already self-positioned. We're building the window with the wall. And the facade, if required to be permanent finish, it could also be a mix of ceramic or terracotta ventilated panels. Internal partitions were recommended to be again lightweight because institutions changes, its use, forces evolve, new spaces are required. So we always recommended drywall panels so that they can be easily changed, replaced, or repositioned. A few finishes on the inside. So those were just the initial thoughts, and I still believe that these are also still, why we're showing this to you is that all of these are still very much viable, very much possible, and very pragmatic thoughts for this particular site. But what we finally went on to build and what we are now constructing is this. So it is interesting and how the architectural processes change so many times when we start interacting with the client. And the reason is many. The reason is that, we are first of all not building for ourselves. It is a building which is, it has many stakeholders. It has IM board. It has the user himself in terms of a more defined set of individuals. And as we start interacting, a lot of different other thoughts, aspirations, different aspects to their experiences of functioning come in. And when we presented our design, they liked it. As we went further, there were a lot of different thoughts were discussed, and a lot of aspects of it were retained. So while this may look like a building which is very different, actually a lot of the features, a lot of the different issues that I spoke of, those have all been retained here. Only the architectural finishing, the character and the style is different. So this is no longer a steel and glass, very contemporary, floating kind of a building. It is a regular, heavier looking block. It is a more, I will say, more regular campus, which is trying to do actually a mix of two things. Instead of trying to retain a lot of the hill and trying to elevate the building over it, we are now actually capturing the ridge of the hill, because over a period of discussion and debate and process, it was felt that the land required maybe more than what we had allowed at the competition stage. And if more blocks are to come up in phase 2 and a larger campus is to evolve, it may be difficult to kind of live with just that strategy and do a minimal construction. If the institute itself wants to grow to phase 2, phase 3, it will need far more land, and that strategy was felt that we need to possibly create more land footprint first of all. Now to create more land footprint, we can only do it by creating a little more plateau area. So the ridge of the hills, which was actually very steep and very sharp and giving us a very, very small footprint, was kind of regraded so that we have more cut and fill, and it gives us a larger plateau area at the top. So what we see in this is an approach road, which is winding its way up from the highway level to the top of the ridge, coming to the main academic plateau. And while this road guide goes right through, but the academic block essentially has the same elements. It has a central quadrangle, It has an auditorium block to the roadside. It has a student and academic area to the valley side. At the entrance, this is the view when we created a marker because the building is quite deep inside from the road. So we thought a taller element is required to kind of pick up the campus presence from a longer distance on the highway. This is a view from the water body side, which is compared to the same situation what we showed you in the competition stage. So this still remains a water body. It is being constructed on site. We do have an amphitheater. We still have the slope and the valley over it. Only the building is now sitting on a ground which has been created for a larger footprint, and the building finishes are more regular, not the glass and steel that we had earlier wanted to. So in this master plan now, what you see is this phase 1, which is in orange color, phase 2, which is in white, and within the first hill, we're actually building in 2 phases. Then the institute goes on further to build on the second hill in further phases. So now you actually have far more area, double the area in fact, on the phase 1 on this hill itself. So that was the idea behind flattening a more bigger footprint, creating more plateau space, creating more hostel space, and giving more usable space without spreading too much. Now, if you look at the detail of the plans or the functions itself, we have 4 blocks, 4 levels between the academic spaces. So while the lowest level is only half a level, overlooking the amphitheater and the water body on the south side. Over that, we have the main auditorium and the library, which are both double height and have faculty offices to one side and academic spaces to the other side. They are actually meant to be, if you look at some of the other IMs, you would have noticed that they have independent blocks. There's the independent auditorium block, library block, MDP block, classroom block, and so on. In this campus, because as it is, there was a need to kind of preserve and to be compact on the footprint. We wanted to, while we agreed to them in some ways, but we still managed to keep it all like one building. There are functionally 4 blocks placed around one quadrangle, but connected in a far more compact manner. So none of these spaces that you see actually have cores within them. The cores are in between the 4 in the white spaces that you see. So the circulation cores, service cores are all common across blocks, which saves a lot of footprint, a lot of area, a lot of service network also. So this is how it is. So we have admin block to the right side, Audi block above, academic block to the left, and the library block to the bottom of the south. Center court, which is a very formal quadrangle, but with interactive spaces. As one crisscrosses it, there are spaces to hang out. But the student spaces then come to the left or to the bottom, which is the library side. A few details of offices within them. We'll be happy to share these. So if any of you would like to, have a closer look, you can certainly do that. But a lot of the aspects remain same, like the horseshoe-shaped classrooms, depending on the size, capacity. So we have 45 and 90 largely, and 140 also. There are, I think, 1 or 2 of 140. Details of the washrooms, details of how the faculty rooms are quite compact but still connected to the classrooms on all levels. So everybody has their own little distance, little more independent functional spaces, but all of them are connected vertically and horizontally together. MDP block to the north over the auditorium. And the senior most faculty, deans, and the director's offices on the top floor of the admin block. In this, at this stage, we had only limited, area available to us. That's why we constructed only this much footprint. But finally, the institute allowed us more area, and what we're now constructing is actually the entire 3rd floor. So these were various spaces, but what is most important in the institute is how not just the spaces function in the indoors, in the rooms. See, within the rooms, all the spaces I'm sure will function in almost every institute. Within academic offices, within classrooms, within library, within OD, everything does function. But what really makes an institute remarkable is how it functions outside these spaces together. How an additional feeling is created for a campus, for an academic space, in between these spaces, so that moment students have a little extra time before classes, after classes, they still have an enjoyable experience, they still have a purposeful experience. There are spaces where they can sit comfortably in various kinds of weather, in various kinds of environment, in various sizes of teams or groups. If somebody wants to study independently, he should not have to go back to hostel. He still should be able to find a nook in a corner for just sitting by himself. If a group of 5, 6 want to meet, they should also be able to meet very easily, find some space, not necessarily indoor, but also some sheltered, some outdoor, some completely outdoor space. The weather is good, and apart from just studying, it is required for students to have a little sense of change and free time apart from the classrooms, but still get on with the purposeful discussions, purposeful use of the time that they have. Which is why all these spaces which are over and above the RFP requirements are extremely important, and they also have to be close and around the main academic block. It is not enough to just design the classrooms or the indoor spaces, but how these outdoor spaces connect to the indoor spaces and how they together form the experience, that is extremely important. Student residential was a group of 4 hostel blocks, which we kept in L form, so that there's not a typical long corridor kind of a feeling. We have very short corridors on both sides of a central lobby, the toilets tucked behind, and there are hardly about 5 or 6 rooms in each leg of the corridor. And these hostels were placed in an L together as a set of 4, so that actually this comes out as a very interesting configuration of 4 blocks, and none of the blocks are very heavy, very long, or very overpowering. These were executive hostels which have attached toilets for senior students, PhD students, etc. Faculty and staff residential in other parts of the campus, which were a little further away, and also sometimes using the northern slope. So we did not completely ignore that slope. The road remains on the ridge, and the larger buildings are to the south, which you can see here, but the smaller buildings were placed on the northern facing slope also. So the campus actually begins from the entrance of the highway, goes right up to the top of the ridge, through the shortest distance, right through, and then comes down towards the center into the valley. In the central space, then we have the sports, dining, and other amenities. Dining hall also, if you notice, it's divided into 2 sections, because not always you have the entire hall required to be used at the same single set of space. So it's very easy to either close a section, do some housekeeping in that section, and still have some part of it functioning. So that is a few glimpses of how the current construction is going on at IIM, and a few more projects we'd like to just briefly share with you. We're also doing Central University Jammu, which is a far bigger campus actually. In terms of quantum of buildings constructed, not many have been constructed as yet, very few, but it's a very interesting way of planning and construction. So this was actually a campus which had a profile, it's about 600 acres, 3 times IIM. It is spread across 3 or 4 hills, and the approach to the highway is only from one road, which is this road. So this highway comes in at this point to the Arrival Plaza, starts its journey across various hills and valleys, but we wanted to cut short and give a very direct, clean connection across these 3 or 4 hills, and also in fact one hill is on the other side of the highway. So this central spine that you see is actually like an elevated bridge, which is cutting right across over the highway, also cutting through the hill 1 onto hill 2, further onto across the valley to hill 3 and 4. So this becomes a very direct, short, easy, safe connection on a daily basis for commute between the different parts of the campus. Now, in a large campus like this, again on a very difficult terrain, how do we create multiple buildings which have similar functions, but the footprint or the topography of every building is different? So, what was done was that if you see carefully, these blocks, they actually have similar amount of mass, but each block is actually a set of 3 or 4 modules. Now, each of these modules is similar. So between one block to next block to next, they're all similar modules, but the arrangement or the permutation of these modules changes depending on the contour. So depending on the view, depending on the contour, depending on the exact slope, the alignment of these modules changes. And a complete set of 4 modules together makes up one department, one science or one typical teaching, department. So that was how each of these schools or each of these departments function. All are overlooking a valley, all have an approach from the upper side or mid-level and stepping down. The valley again was using rainwater harvested in it to create a little more green or a sometimes full of water space. And these modules, if you see the angles, all these angles are depending on respective contours, respective alignments. So in this campus, what we've done first is that we have actually made the road network, the bridges, the culverts, the catchment areas, and the retaining walls first, because we wanted to first of all capture the site in a way that the site is stable. It is not going to fall or change or slope down or slide further down over the years. It is to stabilize the entire site as the work was done, including landscaping. So the entire site is a far more developed, usable land than what we initially started with. And now as each phase, each requirement or each set of funding comes in, different parts of the building, different blocks can be built up. Another project, IIT Roper, about 500 acres, very flat land, quite unlike the earlier 2 sites that we saw. Now in a flat area like this, it's much easier to kind of do a compact planning, to kind of do a more efficient distribution of spaces. In this 500-acre, what you see, there is a main approach road. We have kept a good amount of distance between a very busy road, brought the rest of the institute campus inside after a distance, giving a great sense of arrival to the campus. From this point itself, we have a peripheral road which goes out to the entire edge. There are 3 parts or 4 parts, like in any large institute would have. One is, of course, the core academic area, which is right in the heart. To the left, we have the entire hostel zone, which has sets of hostels, girls, boys, senior students, dining, etc., and some intermediate recreation spaces. To the right, we see the faculty residences, which are in phase 1 low-rise, mid-rise blocks. In phase 2, we would have gone higher, and phase 3 possibly even higher. And in between them, close to both the hostels and the faculty residences, we have the sport block, the sports fields, the indoor games, etc. 4 zones. Always, any institutional campus would have these 4. It is how these 4 feel within themselves and how these 4 come together. That's important. So in this campus, if you see, there is one clear central pedestrian spine, which is direct, short, most visible, most interesting, and a clear way to travel between the various zones. On a daily basis, we expect this to be the really busy hub of activity with crisscrossing students, faculties between various times of the day. So this is where the buzz is, and this is where we want to throw in a lot of extra spaces, some landscapes, some seating, some activities, some shopping amenities, small amphitheaters, trees, that there's a lot of space to take a break or to encourage other activities happening along this spine. And this spine, as the campus grows, the spine and the activities along it also are able to grow. Each zone will grow outwards. So hostel zone grows outwards from this spine, so does residential, so does academic. But the spine is established on day one as the main backbone of the entire campus. So that's a closer view of the spine, how different spaces, paved, unpaved, and other spaces come together. A few views of the phase 1 building. Another project in Delhi, IIIT Delhi, where we did the phase 2, and very, very compact campus, very unlike what we've seen so far. This was total of 25 acres only, very urban, but height limit of 11 floors or 10 floors actually. So we had very tight situations. For example, this white set of buildings is not our project. Our project was only on the fringe, that you see the yellow and the beige buildings. So at this neck, we had to make this building, and this building was, the very tight bottleneck to the site here. But this has some of the largest student halls in the entire campus. So we have to kind of pinch the building in the middle, allow it to expand on both other sides. So this is the kind of building that you see. A building which has a very interesting curve on the facade. On the stilt level, it has these large stilted spaces, and above it has these indoor seminar halls. That's the pinch in the building facade, how the angle and how the flow across the side to both left and right was still emphasized. So the building actually not just breaks the building, but actually it allows a sheltered walkway at the ground level across the two parts of the site. And in fact, the mass visually looks as almost carrying you to the other side. A couple of more campuses. This is a medical campus under construction in South Delhi, which is more streamlined, more straightforward look, more organized, because there is public movement also. So in an academic institution where we have only students dealing, we can do interesting stuff because they'll be soon aware of what is happening on every inch of the campus. But medical institutions, medical colleges are a little different because they also deal with large public coming in, and they would not want any confusion in terms of orientation, spaces, or circulations. That's why you see a little different structured kind of a look. A smaller campus in Chandigarh, again a very contemporary building. This has been finished more or less like this. This is a perspective view, of course, and this is IIIT. Sorry, this is the earliest slide it has come here, but that is more of the sports block of IIIT. So in this, what we did was that we just made the indoor sports block at an elevated level, and these steps that you see are full of students watching the field downwards. Sometimes there is a guest who can be giving an address to the entire student body from the top of this roof, and this can be used as a dais with the entire student body in the field. So it works both ways. But this is IIIT Delhi. This is a different project in Mohali, which I showed you earlier. And we also did IIT Jodhpur academic blocks. So this is while it is the entire campus. Master planning was not done by us, but the phase 1 and phase 2 of the academic zone was done by us, which was a fewer set of buildings at the core. And that's the kind of architecture that you see, very different, but meaningful in terms of the robustness, in terms of the amount of limitation of the openings, limitation of the glass, yet allowing enough daylight into the interiors. The south sides have a little jali facade, north sides do not have any such jali, they have more open glazings, and a lot of sheltered walkways. So we're using again the blocks as walkways themselves. So the edge of the blocks actually cantilevers out or gives additional trellis, and the blocks, as we evolve the blocks, they connect one to the next and become a longer walkway like this one you see here. One more project that we just recently working on in Delhi Sports University. So that's about 80 acres in West Delhi. A lot of sporting facilities and a very, very compact university area. So instead of spreading the university across the entire campus, in this, because the whole purpose of the university is to use the outdoors, use the every square meter of land that we can for the sporting work, which is actually the academic part of the university. So in fact, in this university, interestingly, the landscape is the classroom. So what you see is the buildings which are really consolidated, taller, compact, only either to the west, which is the sports university, or the right side, which is the sports school, and the rest of the entire facility, including the roof of some of the buildings and the entire sporting range of facilities required was created so that all the land is purposefully and actively utilized. A few views of that campus. So hopefully, we've been able to show you a range of ideas on each campus, a range of requirements on each geography and campus site that we have been trying to put together for our clients. This is an extension of Guru Gobind Singh University in Dwarka. Phase 2 we are doing. So while phase 1 was these white buildings, a smaller set of scattered dispersed buildings, but we realized the land is very, very precious now, and we're trying to now in phase 2 consolidate the construction. But we're also lifting the buildings up. So while we build bigger blocks, they still seem lighter. So if you see the landscape, it is flowing right through into the courtyards and beyond also. So while the building is much bigger than the entire phase 1 set of buildings, but still at the ground level, it feels light, it feels airy, and it's still able to give you a lot of connected, consolidated built-up space. So what you see on the left are the older buildings, which are buildings typically sitting on the ground. And what we're doing now on the building in front, which is lifted up and giving a lot of ground space, a lot of movement space below it, and still enjoying the openness. So that was all. Thank you, everybody, for the time and for allowing us to make this presentation.
Thank you so much. It's so much of an insight into many institutional projects that you have been working on. And
yeah,
it's a
I think it's been a wonderful presentation, and I think you have step by step explained to the students on such a challenging site, starting from Jammu, and I think this will give the students an idea how to approach challenging undulating terrain, because it's this is something which students it's a different ball game when you're designing on a flat site, but if you're designing on a undulating site, what are the challenges one faces, and how step by step you have explained the student through the overall the planning and the individual plans, how to approach the different aspects of the problem. And I'm sure this will go a long way for the students to understand how do you approach a problem. Thank you so much. And I think if Professor Anand, if we can have some interaction of queries by students if they have any, or the faculty who are attending, if they have a query, let us utilize this time.
Yes, sir. Any questions coming from students or faculties who are with us?
Or even the faculty can be asking questions, because there's so much to learn.
In fact, I must update, all the students of the class had gone to IIM Jammu, and they had seen so many places in Jammu, starting from the Bahu Fort. They saw the Mubarak Mandi complex also, and they have been working and struggling with the idea of working with the regional material and regional influences. So the first option in which the concept entry which you had shared is something very close to what we have been discussing as to how the lower surfaces of projecting horizontals are visible from contours, and how the building form changes at different levels. So they have been working, and I must update that they are trying to evolve a grid wherein the buildings in the campus follow a certain set of guidelines, so that every student who breaks off from the grid is able to follow a certain set of geometry. In fact, the biggest take from the projects that you shared is the walking connections. You know, when you said that it's not the classroom, it's beyond the classroom experience that is important, and the way you had threaded the Jammu University, the Central Jammu University, and the way you had done the other project, I'm forgetting, which had, yes, IIT Roper, wherein all the buildings were threaded with a central spine, was very, very wonderful. So any questions coming from the class or from the co-faculty teams?
I had a question. Which the option 1 of the IM and option 2, which would be a more of a challenge in construction wise? The option 1 that you suggested to the IM, or the option 2 which is being constructed right now? Which would be a more challenging in construction basis?
What would you imagine? What do you think?
I think the option 1 would have been a little more challenging because of the using of the slopes, but getting a flat land would also be a big challenge over there.
See, option one is challenging to the designer and to the construction team, but option 2 is challenging to the site and nature. So that's the challenge. That's what we have to decide.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Also, the common error that students are making, which we saw in the design option that is being adopted now and previously at the conceptual stage, was that they are trying to, walk very thin with just ground floor and first floor. So another important learning for them is that unless you consolidate floor-wise buildings, you make them lighter, it will not work. You know, that is a very important take.
We must minimize the footprint as far as possible, because land is the most precious resource. The construction is money, but land you just cannot recreate. Whatever you consume is gone.
Correct. That's right, sir. Any more questions coming from the class? You have visited the site also. Can you switch on your cameras and ask questions? We had so much of discussion as to what is to be taught. Can someone share the grid that you are developing? Anybody who's ready with the grid or whatever state the grid is in? Akshansh, Lakshita?
You can always write back to us also with any queries or any thoughts, no problem.
Yes, I believe the students are overwhelmed with so much of presentation.
Oh, that's it.
Yes, sir. Should we close the meeting, sir, in that case?
Yeah, I think just one last, if anyone, if any student has any query or wants to, clarify, you have this opportunity. And because, it's been a great moment for us to be able to, witness some of the award-winning projects that the firm has done. And, the firm has been kind enough not to elaborate on, I mean, they have done volumes of the work, as they've already mentioned, that the whole countries, they have a stamp of their projects all over the country for so many years. So this is a great moment for all of us to learn. If you, I think, sir, with your permission, if I may add that if they come up with the real, complete their project in true sense, they may even approach you, and if you find the work, worthwhile, they may even get a place in your firm after they graduate. What do you say, sir? Maybe that could be an incentive for these students.
You're saying that if the students are able to finish the design, they would like to see them and kind of give them maybe an offer?
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Well, we'll be happy to look at any student who is interested, and definitely take it further from there.
Right. Akshash, were you showing something?
Thank you so much. Kansh, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Sir, I have a question.
We can hear you.
Yes, sir.
It's not very audible. Come again.
Yes, sir.
Professor Anand, did you get what he's trying to convey? Or
Yes,
say?
sir.
Now he's there. I think he's trying to share his design grid that they are working on.
Yes, sir. Sir, मेरा एक क्वेश्चन भी था सबसे पहले.
हाँ, पूछिए.
सर, मेरा क्वेश्चन ये कि जब IIM जम्मू में हम लोग रोड डिजाइन कर रहे हैं, तो उसमें सर अगर हम कोई अपना कॉन्टेक्स्ट मतलब जम्मू इज नोन फॉर हिज केव टेम्पल्स, तो सर अगर हम वहाँ पे कुछ रोड के थ्रू किस तरह से उसके कॉन्टेक्स्ट को डिपिक्ट कर सकते, तो उस पे सर बहुत वर्क करने का कोशिश करा था, लेकिन हिल पे रोड पे इस तरह का कॉन्टेक्चुअल प्लेट नहीं हो पा रहा था. सर, इफ योर थॉट्स अबाउट दैट.
See, I can share what we believe that, while it is of course extremely important to be contextual, but contextual does not mean architecture of the city around you. मतलब आप उस जिस टाइम आप जिससे बात कर रहे हैं, जो उस सिटी के जिन मॉन्यूमेंट्स की बात कर रहे हैं, वो कई साल पहले बने होंगे. जिस टाइम पे वो बने, उस टाइम पे वो कंटेक्स्ट में थे. हम आज की डेट में बना रहे हैं. So we have to be contextual to the time also in which we're building. Maybe the materials which are available to us today were not available earlier. Maybe the issues of maintenance which we are facing today are not relevant earlier. So आपको context सिर्फ location और city का नहीं देखना, context to the site, how much you are going to enjoy the site, what kind of nature the site has, and context to time. ये तीनों देखने हैं. So region is one, site is second, on time is third. Not in that order, but these three are separate aspects of it all. And you have to do your design with context to all three. So whether your road does not feel like a certain temple architecture, that's okay. It doesn't have to. The students who are coming in IIM are not only from Jammu, and they're coming from around the country. And even if they're coming from around the country, it is not a tourist place that they have to see the feeling of Jammu inside the campus. It is sensible to use the learnings from those buildings in the region, use that style and construction of materials, workmanship, detailing, which is hardy for that climate. वो समझना है, उसको use करना है, but not कि हमने उस particular feature को replicate करना है. It is not that we are recreating Jammu region within the site. That's not the objective.
Right. Correct.
Sir, I have a doubt.
Yes, Bhagyashree.
So I want to ask, what all, like, as we design something on a hillside, there are other constraints as well, like landslides and earthquake. So how these challenges have been taken care of while designing IIM Jammu, both the designs, and how they vary in, in the floating structure, how they have catered to earthquake and landslide, and in the other one as well, and how it was convenient, or which one was better actually in terms of earthquake and landslides and other constraints of the site.
See, it's difficult to say better because various aspects have to be weighed. There are always pros and cons to everything. If you wanted a more nature-friendly, futuristic, minimal footprint construction, then of course option one, what we showed you, was better. If you wanted a more larger footprint, more stable in terms of the area that it today builds, and for future also it builds, larger plateau creation, and maybe building which is less expensive to construct, then option two.
Okay, sir. So, and in terms of earthquakes and landslides, what were the considerations were taken out?
See, buildings can be designed for earthquake in any location. That's not a problem. So technically, there's no problem in designing for any level of earthquake. But the challenge is, how do we retain the rest of the site outside the buildings? How is the site stable, and how is the site retained for years ahead? So that is something which it's a mix of civil work in terms of gabion walls, retaining walls, and landscape. These two strategies have to be woven together. And ideally, you should not leave slopes above the buildings. You know, whenever you're picking the buildings in phase 1, you should not have slopes on the level above it. So there should not be any physical danger of slope landslide into the building.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raman sir.
Yes, right.
Any other questions coming from students? Otherwise, we would like to end the meeting because Raman sir would be having. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Good morning. Myself, Architect Chandra. Good morning, sir. I have a question that what were your findings from the context and how you implement them in the campus design?
Sorry,
Am I audible?
not audible.
Okay, okay. So my question was, what are your findings from the context of Jammu and how you implement them in the campus design?
See, Jammu is essentially, there is very little architectural statement which is uniform across the various, buildings across Jammu that you see. There's no distinct architectural style. There are a few important buildings. So if you want to pick up features, you'll have to pick from those important buildings. But again, those are only features. There is no overall riding architectural style because the geography does not particularly require or dictate a certain type of building style. It is Jammu city is largely a set of flat plateaus and flat areas. There are some hilly sites. There are some exceptional locations. Those buildings also have by and large been made on plateaus. So wherever required, they've also flattened a set of the hill, created plateau and then built. Most of the noticeable structures are only with little older structures. Nothing new is significant there. And I think it is what you have to pick up is more of the type of building construction happening, in the sense that what do you do with the rocks that you dig up? What do you do with the stabilization of slopes? How do you make sure that the land is stable? How do you make sure that the water passes through the hills? Those are the issues which are common to Jammu construction. So if you have taken care of those aspects, that is the more important sense of building in that terrain. So construction in that semi-hilly terrain is what Jammu is all about. It is not about architectural expression of a certain material or stone or character. While architecturally we may all love that, to pick up a few things, we can do it. We can pick up local stones. You can pick up some other couple of landmark buildings. You can relate to those. You can pick up, like what we're doing right now in the actual construction, a bit of a sloping parapet on all buildings. It gives a sense of hilly construction. But again, the roof is flat, it's only a sloping parapet. So these are architectural, embellishments, and you can do these in the larger set of plan. But the more important aspects are how do you build on the hill. That is what it's all about.
Thank you, sir.
Sure. Right, Professor Sir, I think.
Thank you, Raman sir. Thank you so much for this talk and time share. We are very obliged for this, and we will connect with you for all good purposes again, sir. Thank you, Sumit. Thank you, Raman sir.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.